Rain hammered Chicago like the city had committed an unforgivable sin. Avery Blackwood stood before apartment 3C, her designer heels submerged in a puddle of dirty water, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. She was the most powerful CEO Blackwood Systems had ever known. She had fired vice presidents without blinking. She had shut down entire divisions with a signature. Tonight, she was here to fire one man. The building smelled of old paint and someone's burnt dinner. The hallway light flickered. Everything about this place contradicted the world. Avery controlled the boardrooms with Italian marble, the office floors that gleamed under motion sensor lights, the silence that money could buy. She raised her fist. Knocked. The door opened. Daniel Carter stood there in an old university shirt, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Behind him, a small girl clutched a stuffed dinosaur to her chest. Avery drew a breath. "You're fired." The words hung in the air like broken glass. Daniel didn't move, didn't slam the door, didn't apologize. "Come in," he said quietly. Avery blinked. Nobody had ever invited her in after being fired. "I'm not. You came all the way here in this weather. You're soaked. Come in." She stepped inside. The apartment was small, clean but worn. A coloring book lay open on a coffee table next to crayons arranged by color. The kitchen was cramped, dishes still in the sink. Daniel closed the door. "Mia, go to your room for a minute, okay?" The girl looked at Avery with dark, serious eyes. "Is she the mean lady from your work? You said your boss was really mean." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Room." The girl disappeared down the hall, the dinosaur dragging behind her. Avery stood in the middle of the living room, water dripping from her coat onto the worn carpet. She had prepared for this. She had the numbers. 63 times, she said. "You've been late 63 times this year. You've requested remote work 17 times. You've left early 41 times. You've missed. I know the numbers. Then you know why I'm here." Daniel folded the dish towel slowly, deliberately. "You're here because I don't fit into your system. I'm here because a company runs on structure, on commitment, on people showing up when they're supposed to show up. I show up every day." His voice was steady, no trace of begging. "Just not on your perfect schedule." Avery felt something shift. She had fired people who cried, people who argued, people who threatened lawyers. Daniel was doing none of those things. "You have a child," she heard herself say. "Where's the mother?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very still. "She died when Mia was 2. The rain outside seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. Avery had built her career on control. Control of meetings, of budgets, of narratives. She controlled how people saw her. Brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. The small voice behind her shattered that control completely. "Are you the bad person at Daddy's work?" Avery turned. Mia stood in the hallway, the stuffed dinosaur now tucked under one arm. She wore pajamas with planets on them. "Mia," I said. "It's okay." Avery surprised herself. She crouched down, and her expensive coat pooled on the floor. "I'm his boss. Sometimes bosses have to make hard choices, like firing people. That's mean." Avery looked at this child, this small, honest creature who hadn't learned to hide the truth yet. "Sometimes it is," she admitted. Mia studied her. "Why are you crying?" "I'm not." Avery touched her face. The mascara, the rain. She didn't know anymore. The distinction seemed to matter less in this cramped apartment than it did in her corner office. "It's just the rain. Daddy cries sometimes too. He thinks I don't know, but I do. He cries in the shower." The information landed like a punch. Avery's eyes flicked to Daniel, saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. "Mia, that's private. But it's true. You said we should always tell the truth." "Yes. But is it a secret?" "No." It's just Daniel's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. Some things are just for family. Mia considered this, her small face serious. Then she looked at Avery with those dark, solemn eyes. Are you family? The question hung in the air like something fragile and dangerous. Daniel moved fast, scooping Mia up. Bedtime. Now. No arguments. But I want to know if... Now Mia. But Avery had seen it. The way Daniel's shoulders curved inward when his daughter mentioned his crying. The way he held her like she was the only thing keeping him from breaking apart. The careful way he walked her back down the hall, whispering something Avery couldn't hear, but could guess, explaining that some things shouldn't be said to strangers, that bosses weren't friends, that walls had to stay up. She stood in the small living room, surrounded by the evidence of a life she had never tried to understand. School papers on the refrigerator, spelling tests with gold stars, a drawing of 2 stick figures labeled Me and Daddy, a calendar with doctor appointments circled in red, dentist next Tuesday, parent-teacher conference on Thursday, vision screening on the 23rd, breakfast dishes still drying on the counter because there was never enough time, a coffee mug that said World's Best Dad next to a smaller cup with a unicorn on it. This was what she had been measuring against her spreadsheets. This was what those 63 late arrivals represented. Not laziness. Not disrespect. This, when Daniel returned, she was looking at a photo on the wall. A woman with kind eyes holding a newborn. Daniel looked younger in the picture. Happier. His arm was around the woman's shoulders, and they were both looking at the baby like she was the most miraculous thing that had ever existed. Her name was Sarah, Daniel said quietly. He stood a few feet away, not coming closer. She was a teacher, 2nd grade. She loved her job almost as much as she loved Mia. I didn't know, Avery said. The words felt inadequate. You never asked. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. But it cut deeper than any rebuke could have. Avery turned away from the photo. Why didn't you tell HR? About your situation? Because I need this job. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. And the moment I become the widower who needs special treatment, I stop being the best analyst you have. I become a charity case. You are the best analyst I have. The admission startled them both. Avery had spent the entire ride here convincing herself this was about standards, about fairness, about running a tight ship. She had ignored what her head of operations kept saying, what the numbers actually showed that Daniel's work was flawless, that his projects came in ahead of schedule, that clients specifically requested him, that he had saved the company from 3 major security breaches in the past year alone. She had focused only on the attendance records because that was something she could measure, something she could control, something that fit into neat columns on a spreadsheet. But standing here, in this apartment that smelled of laundry detergent and something cooking in a slow cooker, looking at the man who had to choose between being on time and being a good father, she realized her metrics were measuring the wrong things. I need to go, she said abruptly. Daniel straightened. So, I'm fired? Avery walked to the door, her hand on the knob. She could feel him watching her back, waiting for the answer that would determine whether his daughter ate next month, whether he could pay the rent, whether all the careful balancing he'd been doing would crash down around him. She thought about her own father, how he'd built a company from nothing, worked 18-hour days, missed every school play and soccer game and birthday, how he'd told her at his retirement dinner that his only regret was that he couldn't remember what any of it had been for. She thought about her mother, who had filed for divorce when Avery was 16, who had said she was tired of being married to a ghost. She thought about the empire she'd built, following in her father's footsteps. The respect she'd earned. The power she wielded. And she thought about coming home to an empty apartment every night and not knowing if this was what winning was supposed to feel like. She opened the door. The rain had lessened to a steady drum. Monday morning, 8:30, my office. She left before he could respond, her heels clicking down the stairwell because she couldn't wait for the elevator. Couldn't stand still, couldn't be in that apartment for one more second without questioning every choice she'd made in the past decade. Her driver looked startled when she yanked open the car door herself. "Home," she said, but as the city blurred past the window, Avery realized she had no idea where home was anymore. The penthouse waiting for her was 35 floors of imported marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was professionally decorated. It had appeared in architecture magazines. It was perfect. It was empty. She'd moved in 3 years ago, brought nothing but her clothes and laptop. The furniture had been selected by an interior designer she'd met once. The art on the walls was investment grade. The kitchen had state-of-the-art appliances she'd never touched. There were no photos on the refrigerator. No crayon drawings. No coffee mugs with silly slogans. When she walked in, motion sensors turned on the lights. The temperature adjusted automatically. Classical music began playing from hidden speakers. It felt like a hotel. She poured herself a glass of wine she didn't want and stood at the window looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, Daniel was probably checking on his daughter, making sure she was really asleep this time. Maybe sitting at that small kitchen table, going over the bills, trying to figure out if the raise he hadn't gotten yet would have made a difference. Avery's phone buzzed. A text from her assistant confirming tomorrow's schedule. 7 a.m. Meeting with the board. Lunch with potential investors. 3 back-to-back presentations. Drinks with the CFO to discuss Q4 projections. She'd built this life deliberately. Chosen it. Fought for it. For the first time in her career, Avery Blackwood questioned whether she had built the right empire. Daniel arrived at 7:45. Avery watched him through the glass wall of her office as he sat in the waiting area, hands folded, posture straight. He wore a suit that had been expensive once, but now showed its age at the cuffs. She had canceled her morning meeting with the board, rescheduled a call with investors in Singapore, pushed back her appearance on the financial news network. Her assistant looked at her like she'd grown a second head. At exactly 8:30, she opened her door. Daniel. He followed her inside. She gestured to a chair, but he remained standing. "I'm not going to fire you," she said without preamble. "I know. You said that Friday. I'm also giving you a 20% raise." His expression didn't change. "Why?" "Because you're worth it. Because I looked at your actual performance instead of just the attendance sheet. Because, no." He cut her off, and for the first time, she heard anger in his voice. "You don't get to do this." Avery sat back. "Excuse me? You don't get to show up at my home, terrify my daughter, make me spend the entire weekend wondering how I'm going to feed her, and then play the generous benefactor on Monday morning." Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. "This isn't kindness. It's guilt." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're right." Avery stood, meeting his eyes. "It is guilt. Because I built a company that only works for people who don't have lives outside these walls. I promoted efficiency over humanity. I measured success in hours logged instead of problems solved." She moved to the window overlooking the city. "I didn't know you were a single parent. I didn't know because I never asked. I saw the numbers and made a judgment without seeing the person. And now you want to fix it with money? No." She turned back to him. "I want to fix it with policy." The board meeting started at 2. Avery walked in with a proposal that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Flexible scheduling for parents. Protected family time. Performance metrics based on output rather than seat time. Marcus Aldridge, the oldest board member, set down his pen with a sharp click. "You're proposing we abandon the structure that made this company profitable? I'm proposing we update it for the actual humans who work here. Humans who signed contracts agreeing to our terms. Humans who are parents, who have emergencies, who have lives." Avery pulled up the data she'd spent the weekend compiling. "Our turnover rate among working parents is 47% higher than the company average. We're losing institutional knowledge. We're losing talented people. We're losing money." She clicked to the next slide. Daniel Carter has missed 63 arrivals this year. He's also saved us $2 million in prevented system failures. He's also retained 3 major clients who were about to leave. The question isn't, why is he late? The question is, why are we measuring the wrong things? The silence in the room was heavy. Rebecca Song, the CFO, leaned forward. You're basing a major policy shift on one employee? I'm basing it on what we could be if we stopped pretending everyone's life fits into a 9-to-5 box. Avery met each board member's eyes. I'm basing it on the fact that we're supposed to be a tech company, built on innovation, and we're using attendance policies from 1,950. The vote was narrow. 4 in favor, 3 against. But it passed. The coffee shop near the office became an unexpected, neutral ground. Avery didn't plan it. She was simply there one morning at 6, before the chaos of the day began, when Daniel walked in with Mia. The girl recognized her immediately. "You're the crying lady." Avery felt her face heat. Daniel looked mortified. "Mia, that's not... It's fine." Avery surprised herself again. "I was the crying lady. Though technically it was just rain. Daddy said it was probably both, but the girl was already climbing into the booth across from Avery, the stuffed dinosaur settling beside her. Daniel had no choice but to follow. "We do breakfast here on Thursdays," Mia announced. "Because Daddy can't cook pancakes. I can cook pancakes. You just don't like my pancakes. They're flat. Pancakes are supposed to be flat, not that flat." Avery watched this exchange, this easy rhythm of a father and daughter who had built a world for two. When had anyone last spoken to her this way? Not as CEO Blackwood, not as the woman who controlled budgets and careers, but just as a person who might have an opinion on pancakes? The waitress brought Daniel black coffee and Mia hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. She looked at Avery. The usual? Avery realized she had become predictable in her solitude. "Yes, thank you." Mia was studying her with that unnerving directness children have. "You have pretty earrings." Avery touched the small diamond studs. "Do you have kids?" "Mia, that's personal." "No, I don't." Avery met the girl's eyes. "I focused on my career instead." "Do you wish you had kids?" Daniel put his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry." But Avery was thinking about the question. Really thinking. When had she last allowed herself to think about the roads not taken? "Sometimes," she said honestly. "Yes." Mia nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to arranging her marshmallows into a pattern. Daniel caught Avery's eye over his daughter's head, his expression somewhere between apologetic and amused. They stayed for an hour, talked about nothing important. Mia's upcoming school project on dinosaurs. The weather. The new bakery opening down the street. When they left, Avery sat alone with her cold coffee and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had laughed. The system crashed at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. Avery was still at the office, as usual, but so was Daniel, which was unusual. He was on a video call with their West Coast team, troubleshooting why the entire customer database had frozen. She heard his voice first, calm and methodical, walking someone through a diagnostic sequence. She found him in the server room, laptop balanced on a rack, phone to his ear. "No, don't restart yet. We need to isolate the corruption first, or we'll lose everything." He noticed her and held up one finger. "Okay, run that query. Good. Now check the log for any writes in the last 30 minutes. Avery watched him work. This wasn't the exhausted single father from the apartment. This was the analyst worth his weight in gold, the one who saw patterns others missed. Found it. Daniel's fingers flew across the keyboard. Someone pushed an update without testing it in staging. "I can roll it back, but I need executive authorization to override the..." "Do it," Avery said. He looked up, startled. He hadn't realized she'd been standing there. "Do it," she repeated. "Whatever you need." 20 minutes later, the system was stable. The crisis averted. Daniel slumped against the server rack, exhaustion finally showing. "Good work," Avery said. "It's what you pay me for." "No, it's what I should pay you more for." She pulled over a chair, sat. They were both in a room full of blinking lights and the hum of cooling fans. "Why are you here this late?" "Mia's at a sleepover. I figured I'd catch up on the backlog." "You're using your child-free night to work?" "What else would I do?" The question hung there. Avery thought about her own empty penthouse. All the nights she'd stayed at the office, not because work demanded it, but because there was nothing else. "We're both terrible at this," she said. "At what?" "Living." Daniel laughed, short and sharp. "Speak for yourself. I have a 7-year-old who forces me to watch animated movies and eat cereal for dinner. My life is very full, but you're always exhausted." "Yes, that's parenthood. Is it worth it?" The question came out quieter than she intended. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd shown up at his door in the rain. "Every single second," he said. "Even the terrible ones." Avery didn't plan to see them again outside work. But Mia had other ideas. The girl approached her in the lobby 2 weeks later. Daniel nowhere in sight. "Can I ask you something?" "Where's your father?" "Bathroom." "Can I ask you something?" Avery crouched down. "Okay, why don't you have a boyfriend?" Avery blinked. That's a very personal question. Daddy said I shouldn't ask personal questions, but I think you're lonely." The directness of it, the truth of it, took Avery's breath away. "I'm very busy," she managed. "Daddy's busy too, but he says people need people. He says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but it's not okay to be alone all the time." Daniel appeared then, slightly out of breath. "Mia, what did I say about ambushing people? You said don't, but I think Miss Blackwood needs a friend." "Oh my God." Daniel grabbed his daughter's hand. "I'm so sorry. We're working on boundaries." But Avery stood slowly, something shifting in her chest. "She's right." Daniel stopped. "What?" "I don't have friends. I have associates, business contacts, people who want something from me." The girl nodded sagely, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected all along. "You could be friends with Daddy. He's nice. He makes terrible pancakes, but he's really good at reading voices for storybooks. And he knows all the dinosaur names." Avery felt a smile tugging at her mouth despite herself. "Those are important qualifications. I think you'd be good for him. He's been sad for a really long time." The lobby seemed to go quiet. Even the usual bustle of people coming and going faded into background noise. Daniel's hand tightened on Mia's shoulder. "Sweetheart, that's enough." But Mia wasn't finished. "Daddy says he can't have nice things because he has to take care of me first. But I think he deserves nice things too. And I think you're nice, under all the scary boss stuff." "Okay." Daniel physically picked up his daughter. "We're leaving now. I'm so sorry. We'll see you Monday." He was at the door when Avery's voice stopped him. "Daniel." He turned, Mia still in his arms. "She's right. You do deserve nice things." The text came through at 7 on a Sunday morning. "Daniel, Mia wants to know if you like dinosaurs. She's doing a presentation and needs expert opinions." Avery stared at her phone in the pristine silence of her penthouse. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, nothing moved. She typed, "I know very little about dinosaurs. Daniel." Perfect. She prefers to educate rather than discuss. Daniel. This is completely optional. If it's weird, just say so. She's 7. She'll move on to her next obsession by Tuesday. Avery looked around her apartment. The original art on the walls, the designer furniture no one sat on, the kitchen that came with the place and had never been used. Avery. What time? 2 hours later, she stood outside Daniel's apartment building in jeans and a sweater. No designer heels, no power suit, just herself. Daniel opened the door looking surprised, even though he'd given her the address. "You came. I said I would." Mia thundered down the hallway, the stuffed dinosaur now wearing a paper crown. "Miss Blackwood, you have to sit here." "Daddy, you sit there. This is a serious presentation." The next hour passed in a blur of construction paper, marker drawings, and breathless explanations about the Cretaceous period. Mia was serious about her dinosaurs. Daniel made coffee that was much better than the office break rooms. At some point, Avery found herself on the floor, helping cut out paper palm trees. "This isn't what I expected when I woke up this morning," she admitted. Daniel handed her the tape. "What did you expect?" "Emails. Conference calls with London. Reviewing the quarterly projections. Sounds thrilling. It's what I'm good at. You're also apparently good at palm tree construction." She looked at the lopsided creation in her hands and laughed. Actually laughed. Mia paused her presentation. "You should laugh more. You look different when you laugh." "Different how? Not scary." After the presentation, which Avery applauded enthusiastically, Mia settled on the couch with a movie. Daniel walked Avery to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. "She doesn't have a lot of people in her life. It's mostly just us. She's remarkable." "She is." He leaned against the door frame. "Avery, I need to say something." Her heart kicked in her chest. "Okay, if this, whatever this is, makes you uncomfortable, tell me now. You're my boss. The power dynamic is complicated. If you want to stop, do you want to stop?" The question hung between them. "No," Daniel said finally. "But I need to know you'll tell me if you do. Because I can't lose this job, and Mia can't lose the stability." Avery understood what he was really saying. He was giving her the power to hurt him, and asking her to be careful with it. "I'll tell you," she promised. "And Daniel, if I make you uncomfortable as your boss or otherwise, you tell me too." He nodded. The relief in his eyes was visible. She left before she could complicate things further, but on the drive home, she texted him. "Avery. Next Sunday? Daniel. Dinosaurs or something else?" Avery. Dealer's choice. Daniel. "Mia votes for the aquarium. I vote for somewhere with coffee." Avery. "Compromise?" Daniel. "That's very CEO of you." She smiled at her phone, then caught herself. When had she started smiling at text messages? At a stoplight, another text came through. "Daniel." "Hey, Avery." "Yes, Daniel. You didn't fire me that night." Avery. "I know." Daniel. "You fired someone else." She stared at those words, understanding blooming. Daniel. "You fired the version of yourself that measured people by the wrong metrics. That's harder than firing an employee." Avery's throat tightened. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on the truth. Avery. "I'm still figuring out who I am without that armor." Daniel. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere." The light turned green. The city stretched out before her, and for the first time in years, Avery Blackwood didn't know exactly where she was going. But she thought maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Number epilogue. 3 months later. The Thursday morning coffee shop had become a routine. Avery arrived first now, claiming the booth by the window. She'd stopped checking her phone every 30 seconds. Stopped mentally rehearsing talking points for the day's meetings. Just sat with her coffee and watched the morning light move across the table. Daniel and Mia arrived at 6:15 like clockwork. Except now it wasn't Daniel and Mia. It was Daniel and Mia and Avery. The waitress didn't ask for orders anymore. She just brought them. Black coffee for Daniel. Hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Mia. A latte for Avery that somehow the waitress knew she'd prefer to her usual plain coffee. Mia had moved on from dinosaurs to astronomy. She was currently explaining the difference between meteors and meteorites with the same intensity she'd once reserved for the Jurassic period. Her backpack was covered in glow-in-the-dark stars she'd applied herself. slightly crooked but full of enthusiasm. Daniel caught Avery's eye over his coffee, a silent apology for the onslaught of space facts. She shook her head slightly. No apology needed. She'd learned about the solar system in the past month. More importantly, she'd learned what it felt like to be trusted with a child's excitement. At work, nothing had changed and everything had changed. Daniel still arrived late sometimes when Mia had a doctor's appointment or a school event. But now other parents did too. The new flexible policy had been adopted by 40% of staff within the first month. Productivity was up. Turnover was down. 2 competitors had called asking about the specific policy, curious about results. The board had stopped questioning Avery's judgment months ago. After breakfast, they walked Mia to school together. It had started as coincidence, they were both headed in that direction anyway. Now it was deliberate. At the school gate, Mia hugged her father, then turned to Avery. "Are you going to hug me too?" Avery had never been a hugger. But she knelt down, and the small arms wrapped around her neck with surprising strength. "Have a good day," Avery said. "You too. Don't work too hard. Daddy says you forget to eat lunch. I'll remember today." Mia ran off to join her friends, the backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Daniel and Avery stood at the gate, watching until she disappeared inside. "She's getting attached," Daniel said quietly. "Is that bad?" "I don't know yet." They walked toward the office in silence for a block. Then Daniel said, "I need to know something." Avery braced herself. "Are we friends?" The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, that Avery stopped walking. "Yes," she said. "We're friends." "Good." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Because Mia asked me what you were to us, and I didn't know what to say. Friend seemed too small. Boss seemed wrong. So I said you were important." "Important," Avery repeated. "Is that okay?" She thought about the empty penthouse, the calendar that used to have only board meetings and conference calls, the life she'd built that looked impressive from the outside and felt hollow from the inside. She thought about Sunday aquarium trips and terrible pancake debates and a 7-year-old who told the truth before she'd learned it was safer to lie. "Yes," Avery said. "Important is exactly right." They kept walking. The city moved around them, people rushing to work, car horns, the smell of coffee and exhaust and possibility. Daniel's hand brushed hers, just for a second. Not holding, just touching. A question without words. Avery didn't pull away. They arrived at the office building, held the door for each other, rode the elevator up in companionable silence. When the doors opened, they went to their separate floors. Avery to the executive suite, Daniel to the analyst pool. But before the elevator doors closed, Daniel looked back. "Same time next Thursday?" "Same time," Avery confirmed. The doors slid shut. She was alone again, but not lonely. That night, in the penthouse that felt less empty than it used to, Avery pulled out her laptop. She opened a document she'd been working on. A proposal for the board, expanded parental leave, childcare subsidies, mental health resources. She wasn't done firing her old self yet, but she was getting there, one Thursday morning at a time.